Chelsea Shaw, a determined journalist with black hair and piercing green eyes, received an anonymous tip about a possible lead in the disappearances. The location was an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, its dilapidated walls and boarded-up windows offering little in the way of comfort or solace. As she approached the building, she could feel a shiver run down her spine, as if the very air was thick with unease. She carefully surveyed the area before entering the warehouse, her senses on high alert. The faint smell of musty old paper and mold hung heavily in the air, adding to the eerie atmosphere. She moved cautiously through the darkness, her footsteps echoing softly on the concrete floor. Suddenly, she heard a faint whisper from somewhere deep within the shadows. It sounded like someone was calling her name. Chelsea's heart raced as she quickened her pace, following the sound. She rounded a corner and stumbled upon a hidden alcove, illuminated by the dim light of a single bare bulb. In the center of the alcove, she found a piece of paper pinned to the wall. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized the handwriting as that of the Shadow, the mysterious figure who had been leaving cryptic messages at each of the disappearance scenes. The message read, "He's close, much closer than you think." She glanced over her shoulder, suddenly aware that she was not alone. A figure lurked in the shadows, watching her intently. Chelsea's breath caught in her throat as she recognized Detective Liam O'Rourke. He had been assigned to the case, but she hadn't expected him to be here. He motioned for her to approach him, his expression grim. "I heard you were asking questions," he said gruffly, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do you know?" Chelsea hesitated for a moment, unsure how much she could trust him. But she knew that if she didn't share what she'd found, it could be disastrous. Taking a deep breath, she related her discovery of the message and her suspicion that the Shadow was closer than they thought. "I can't say for sure," she finished, "but I think we need to take this seriously." Detective O'Rourke considered her words for a moment before nodding slowly. "You're right," he agreed. "We can't afford to let our guard down." With that, they both turned their attention back to the message, determined to unravel the mystery before it was too late. They spent hours poring over every detail, examining the handwriting, the paper, the ink. They compared it to the other messages they had found at the scenes of the disappearances, searching for any similarities or differences that might offer a clue. As they worked, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The air in the warehouse seemed to thicken with tension, and every noise made their hearts race. Finally, as the sun began to set outside, they made a chilling discovery: a tiny, hidden camera concealed high in the rafters. It was clear that they were indeed being watched, and that the Shadow was always one step ahead. The realization sent a shiver down both of their spines. They knew they had to act fast, before it was too late. They left the warehouse in silence, their minds racing with possibilities. Chelsea's black hair swirled around her face in the night breeze, her green eyes narrowed in thought. Detective O'Rourke ran his hand through his light hair, his expression grim. They both knew that they were now in a dangerous game of catch the criminal with the Shadow. Back at the station, they pored over hours of footage from the hidden camera, searching for any clue as to the identity of the Shadow. They watched as the mysterious figure moved silently through the shadows, always managing to stay just out of reach. The closer they got to uncovering the truth, the more they realized how deep the conspiracy ran. As they continued their investigation, they began to uncover a web of corruption and deceit that reached far beyond anything they could have imagined. They discovered that the disappearances were not random, but part of a sinister plan to cover up a series of heinous crimes. The Shadow was not only trying to warn them, but also trying to stop them from uncovering the truth. The further they delved, the more they realized that their own lives were in danger. Every time they closed in on a lead, they felt as if they were walking into a trap. But they refused to give up. Chelsea and Detective O'Rourke knew that the fate of countless innocent people depended on them unraveling the mystery and bringing those responsible to justice. As another day dawned, they found themselves back at the abandoned warehouse, their hearts pounding with determination. They had to find a way to stop the shadow before it was too late. The eerie silence of the night was broken only by the whisper of the wind and the distant echo of their footsteps as they moved deeper into the shadows, closer to the truth. The air was thick with tension, and every step they took felt like walking into a trap. But they refused to let fear hold them back. They knew that they were getting closer, and that the shadow was growing more desperate. The hidden camera in the rafters had revealed that their quarry was just as skilled at tracking them as they were at tracking the shadow. It was a deadly game of cat and mouse, and they couldn't afford to make a single mistake. As they continued their search, they stumbled upon a hidden room, its walls lined with files and photographs. The room was like a shrine to the missing people, a grim testament to the crimes that had been committed. They pored over the files, each more disturbing than the last, as they pieced together the identity of the mastermind behind it all. The trail led them to powerful politicians, corrupt businessmen, and even members of the police force itself. The scope of the conspiracy was immense, and they knew that taking down those responsible would not be an easy task. But they were determined. Chelsea and Detective O'Rourke knew that the lives of countless innocent people depended on them, and they refused to let them down. They would not rest until justice was served and the truth was revealed, even if it meant putting their own lives on the line. Days passed as they continued to dig deeper. They discovered that the corruption went far beyond anything they could have imagined. It reached into the highest levels of power and threatened to bring down the entire justice system. The shadow, they realized, was not just a vigilante, but a symbol of hope in a world gone mad. A lone voice crying out in the darkness, trying desperately to save those who could not save themselves. Their investigation led them to a secret meeting between some of the most powerful people in the city, where they discussed plans to cover up their crimes and silence anyone who got in their way. Chelsea and Detective O'Rourke knew they had to act fast if they wanted to bring these criminals to justice. With the help of anonymous sources and their own cunning, they managed to infiltrate the meeting. As they listened in horror to the plans being laid, they also realized that the shadow had been right all along. These people were not just criminals, but monsters. They would stop at nothing to maintain their power and control. As the meeting came to a close, Chelsea and Detective O'Rourke made their move. They arrested the entire room, bringing down the corrupt system from the inside out. The city erupted into chaos, but it was a chaos born of hope. For the first time in years, people began to believe that justice might truly be served. In the midst of the chaos, they received a message from the shadow, thanking them for their courage and dedication. The mysterious figure revealed that its true identity was someone they had trusted all along, someone who had been fighting against the corruption from within. It was a revelation that shocked them to the core, but also filled them with a renewed sense of purpose. As they worked to rebuild the city and restore order, Chelsea and Detective O'Rourke knew that their work was far from over. There would be more criminals to bring to justice, more innocent lives to protect. But they did so with a newfound sense of hope and determination, inspired by the shadowy figure who had been their guide through the darkest corners of the city. Together, they would create a brighter future for all. The world seemed to change around them as the months passed. New leaders emerged, promising transparency and accountability. Old alliances were forged and new ones made. The city began to heal, the scars of corruption slowly fading from view. And yet, Chelsea couldn't help but feel that something was still missing. One day, as they were having lunch at a small cafe, they noticed a familiar figure sitting in the corner, wearing a long, black coat and a wide-brimmed hat. It was the shadow, and despite everything that had happened, they couldn't help but feel a twinge of excitement and anticipation. They paid their bill and made their way over to the mysterious figure. As they sat down, Detective O'Rourke cleared his throat. So, we've been meaning to talk to you about that. The shadow smiled enigmatically, taking a sip of coffee. Yes, I imagine you have quite a few questions. Chelsea leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. Who are you? The shadow chuckled softly. Oh, I've never been one for introductions. But I will say this. I am someone who cares deeply about this city, and I will always fight to protect it, even if I have to do so from the shadows. They sat in silence for a moment, taking in the weight of the shadow's words. Finally, Detective O'Rourke spoke up. Well, if you ever need help, you know where to find us. The shadow nodded, standing up from the table. Thank you, Detective. I know I can count on you both. And with that, the figure disappeared into the crowd, leaving them with a sense of awe and admiration. Chelsea turned to her partner, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. You know, I think we'll be seeing more of the shadow in the years to come. Detective O'Rourke grinned in agreement. I wouldn't be surprised, Chelsea. I wouldn't be surprised. As they continued to sit at the cafe, they couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in what they had accomplished. They had brought down a corrupt empire, brought justice to the innocent, and rebuilt a city from the ashes. But more than that, they had found a kindred spirit in the shadow, someone who shared their determination and passion for a better world. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. The city continued to heal, and new leaders emerged, promising a brighter future for all. Chelsea and Detective O'Rourke remained at the forefront of the fight against crime, their partnership growing stronger with each passing day. And yet, there were still whispers in the shadows, reminders that the fight was far from over. They knew that there would always be those who sought power at the expense of others, and that they would need the help of allies like the Shadow to keep the city safe. One evening, as they were just about to head home, they received a cryptic message from an anonymous source. It was written in code. Protector read part of the message. They knew instantly what it meant. They were needed once again. Without a second thought, they raced towards the address given in the message, their hearts pounding in their chests. As they rounded the corner, they saw a group of armed men surrounding a young woman. In the shadows, they could just make out the familiar silhouette of the shadow, waiting for the right moment to strike. They drew their weapons, signaling to the thugs that they were outnumbered. The shadow nodded in acknowledgement, and with a flurry of movement, dispatched the men with expert precision. When it was all over, the young woman, shaking and tear-stained, turned to them, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." They exchanged knowing glances with the shadow, who had stepped out of the shadows once more. "It was nothing," Detective O'Rourke replied, his voice steady. "We're just doing what needs to be done." The shadow smiled, bowing head in respect. "Indeed," the figure said softly. "Indeed we are." As Chelsea and Detective O'Rourke walked away, they knew that their journey together was far from over. There would be more challenges, more adversaries to face. But with each step they took, they felt stronger, more prepared for whatever the future might hold. And with the shadow by their side, they knew that they could accomplish anything. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it.